Let's take a deep breath right now and relax while Mary shares with us her experiences with psychic perception and leads us through a series of exercises designed to improve both your ability and accuracy in interpreting intuitive information. Now, I need you to listen closely, take notes, because Mary's advice is very valuable and practical for anyone who wants to use intuition as a means for guidance. And now let's give a warm applause for Mary Roach.
Thanks. Okay. You guys tired? No. You've been working all day. And I work all day, I'm pretty tired. Okay, well, we'll do a little bit more tonight. You're going to do a reading tomorrow as well. And if there's anybody in the back room and there's room to bring them back in here, if you want to, come on in here, because I hate them having to sit back there behind the partition like there's something wrong with them. That's staff, people that work here. All right. My name is Mary Roach. I'm a professional intuitive. I didn't go to college for intuition. There was no such thing at the time. I went to Mary Washington College in Fredericksburg, Virginia, now known as the University of Mary Washington. I studied theater. Did a lot of directing, worked in human services, that kind of thing. I thought maybe I'd be a psychologist, but I never got around to it because my grades were not that good. I got C's. You need to get B's anyway. And I've been doing readings for about 20 years now. And a lot of people, in the middle of a reading even, will ask me, how did you get here? How do you do this? How did you end up doing readings? What happened to you? And I have the most average story pretty much in the world. I have no reason to say that I ever saw dead guys. I wasn't like that kid in The Sixth Sense. I didn't see dead guys. I didn't have extraordinary experiences, technically speaking, just average life. The way that I talk about intuition is a little bit different, and I took classes, and I'm from Massachusetts. I was born in Boston, and my parents moved to Cape Cod in the early 1980s, and on Cape Cod, Massachusetts is a tremendously open-minded community. There's a lot of healers, spiritual people. New England is actually a pretty cool area for this kind of thing, except for the whole Salem thing, but I guess they got past that at some point. And it was not uncommon for us to take classes. I took classes with a lady named Pat McKenna. And I took the classes because I wanted to. So I find that half of psychic development or intuitive development has to do with your desire to do it. If you want to do it, if it's an interest of yours, any more than painting, writing, dancing, scrapbooking, sewing, if it's an interest of yours, you'll probably excel at it. The other reason I think that intuition really is important. I think it's becoming more and more important for people as we move further into the 21st century, as we move further into the Aquarian age. The 21st century is going to be an age where I do believe people will need to use their intuition. They will need to work with their inner voice. They will need to tap into an inner consciousness. And I'll give you an example. If you go back, I've done readings for years and years and years now. And back in the 80s, and I always tell people this story, in the 80s, doing readings was kind of fun. You'd just have a person come in and they'd have just a little divorce going on or something. Just one divorce, one issue. And we'd work through it and talk about some past lives and talk about their purpose in the relationship and did they learn it, and then move forward, and everything was just kind of spiffy. And then we'd just move on to the next person, and then the next reading would be, the one issue. Should I go to college or not? It wasn't necessarily big traumatic stuff. It was just life. And then, Kevin Ryerson mentioned it last night, the harmonic convergence seemed to have happened in 1987. I believe it was the summertime. I believe it was August. And I remember being one of those new agey types, out on the beach, waiting for something to happen. We stayed up all night, and nothing happened. And we were all tired and had to go to work the next day. And, it was, nothing really happened for the harmonic convergence because we were all sort of silly and, young and expecting something big to happen coming in on shore or something. And nothing actually came on shore and nothing actually happened. Except the readings changed about that time. Around that time, I noticed that the readings started getting really serious. And people came in and they had abuse issues. And I told you I got a C in psych. So I was like, oh, okay, this is serious. And then people started coming in and having major crises. It wasn't just one crisis. They would have a diagnosis of breast cancer, a divorce, and they would be having their house mortgaged, their house would be being repossessed, taken back away from them. And so there'd be like 3 things started happening at a time. And it seemed like that accelerated from 1987 through about 91. In 1991, I came here to Atlantic University because I thought, I better get some training. If I'm going to keep doing these readings, and I did do a lot of readings. I had a job at the time, but I still did a lot of readings, and I felt like I wasn't really qualified to answer the problems that people were having. And it was, of course, it was never me, but that my opinion was, I need some kind of education to back this thing. So I found out that ARE had a school, and they called it Atlantic University, and they offered a master's degree, which I was qualified to get. And so I did. I started studying for the master's degree. It took me a long time to get it, but we won't even say how long. But I did finally get that degree. But it was actually the readings that have taught me everything I've learned. I'd love to say I buy books like a crazy person, but I don't read half of them. I love buying books, but I just don't always have time to read them. I'm married to a writer. I haven't read all of his books either, and that kind of irritates him, actually. So in this situation, the learning, the education I've gotten has been from the readings. It's really been from you. And I know a bunch of you out there, so I know I've done readings for a big chunk of you, so you guys have been part of what I've learned. In this situation, with the 21st century starting to form, I've found that the kind of problems that people have been having, because there are so many multiple crises, I started looking into what was going on with people. And I did find that the patterns from the Piscean age were really, really coming to an end. So if you had a problem in the 15th century with self-esteem, you were going to come into the 20th century with a problem with self-esteem. If you had a problem with control, being a control freak, or being the child of 5 control freaks, then you were going to end up being the child of 5 control freaks, or even 10 in this lifetime. So I've noticed that patterns that were unfinished were all coming to a head. And what I have found is that in some ways, all of us are very fortunate in that we were all born, for the most of us, there's no babies in here, so we were all born in the 20th century. We were all born in the Piscean age, so we all have 1 foot in the Piscean age. And we all came in with this intention that we were going to finish some of these old patterns that we had not finished before. We were going to meet them. We were going to complete them. So we were going to all probably die sometime in the Aquarian age, but we were all born in the Piscean age, which right now the kids being born are really born in the Aquarian age. I just will skip ahead to the book. Back in the 80s, I did find that one of the things that I really did enjoy was psychic development classes. And I took them, I told you, with a woman named Pat McKenna, 1984, 5, somewhere in that time frame, and she would have so many people at the community college in her classes of all ages. She was a very good psychic, and she was also a very good teacher. And she wouldn't teach psychic development. She was actually very smart. She taught spiritual development, and she introduced people to the realm of the spiritual realities. Healing, because really all the different things people could do in the healing arts and the spiritual arts and the metaphysical arts, and ideas of reincarnation, that kind of thing. She was actually very broad-minded. So she was a good teacher for me to have because I'm much more a proponent of spiritual development than psychic development. I feel psychic development on its own kind of doesn't do a whole lot. Spiritual development almost automatically leads to psychic development, generally speaking, because it's the spark of the divine within the human consciousness that you're tapping into. So a long time ago, in about 80-something, 87, 86, I found this book. It's called Are You Really Too Sensitive? It's by Marcy Calhoun. And the reason I like it, and I happened to find this book, I think I've been keeping this woman in print, actually, because I recommend it every time I teach. But one of the reasons I like this is it talks about sensitivity as a psychic experience, rather than seeing dead guys as a psychic experience. That's, there are people who do have extraordinary experiences. There's no doubt about that. But in my experience, my hypersensitivity was the road to opening up into the psychic world. So that's why it worked for me. And so she talks about sensitivity. I don't love the title of the book, but she talks about being about what sensitivity is and how to work with it, and how sensitivity, if you turn it on its ear, is really psychicness. That's what she really talks about. So I recommend this book. She's still around, by the way. Marcy is still in California teaching. One day I should really meet her. because she has some really great ideas, and she originated them. The other thing here, besides Marcy's book with her ideas on sensitivity, has to do with the whole psychic realm. With spiritual development. There are a lot of books that Casey, this organization has published and other organizations have published that really would work very well and dovetail very nicely with spiritual development. Meditation. Anybody that meditates is probably going to be able to tap into intuition very easily. Anybody who's creative is going to tap into spirituality relatively easily if they choose to. Anybody who does any kind of work with people, like if you spend a lot of time with people, you're probably going to tap into people much more easily because you're surrounded by them. You're drowning in them. So teachers, doctors, people who work with people, and particularly the very people-oriented people are going to be able to really, really tap into the human being very, very well. So that's what we're really talking about, is that the sensitivity, to me, is really the key to psychicness. It's one of the main keys to psychicness. There are people who have extraordinary experiences, and I have always said I was never really one of them. I've always said that. And then they said, okay, well, you come speak at ARE and talk about your psychic experiences. And I said to my husband, I don't have any psychic experiences. All my experiences are readings for other people, so it's their psychic experiences. I'm not having it because I don't remember all the readings. I don't remember everything we talk about. I remember bits and pieces. I remember this one's brother was in jail. I remember that one's father was a lush. I remember certain little details of stuff once I'm tapped into the person again. But I don't remember everything. If I see you, I don't remember all the readings. It's not my reading. It's yours. So that's the difference with psychic experiences. It's not your experience is yours, mine, my personal experiences are mine. And then my husband started saying, oh, you have had psychic experiences. And I said, I have not. And so we started talking about it, and he said, well, what about the time, and this is in the late 90s, I believe, when Meredith Puryear, some of you guys might have known Meredith, she worked here for a long time, had a heart attack. And she was scheduled to go on a trip to Egypt. And my husband's named Kevin. He works here. And he's worked here for a long time. He's had every job pretty much on the planet in this building here. But he has been, he was tapped to go on the trip because Meredith was in the hospital. And it was really, really serious. And Kevin says, well, I'm so anxious. And this is the night before the Egypt tour is leaving. And Kevin says, well, I don't think I can really, I'm so stressed. I really have so much work to do at work. I cannot just get up and go to Egypt tomorrow morning. And so he said, would you do a reading on it? And of course I did. And what was interesting was I said, look, this is really a great trip and you have a good time. And he and Ahmed Fayed, who used to run the trips, they were like this. And those two just got along really, really well. It's like you have a lot of time for bonding with Ahmed. You guys will be having a good time with each other. The only thing, though, is somebody is late. I don't know what the deal is, but someone's late. Someone on the trip, I don't know, it was like 30 or 50 people. One person is late. It's kind of an annoyance, really. Just that one person. And I figured, maybe there was some reason that the one person was late. So the next night rolls around. Kevin's left for the trip. And about midnight, my phone rings. And I answer the phone, and I was like, what's going on? And Kevin's like, guess who's the one person who's not going to make the trip? And I said, who's going to be late? And I said, who? And he said, me. I was like, where are you? He said, I'm in Norfolk. I haven't left yet because there was some kind of a storm. And so he ended up not getting out of Norfolk till a day later. And then when he got out of Norfolk, they had to send a special person up the Nile to get Kevin, to get him. And he was the one person that caused like 10 people to work extra hard and stay up all night. But so he was the one guy that was late. So he said, that was a psychic experience for me. So I said, but he ended up having a good time and the trip went well. So I said, okay, well, that's interesting. So then I started thinking, what can I do to create more exercises where I could tap into my own intuition? Because here I could tune into something that happened to him, like pretty easily, kind of casually. And most people can do it. Everybody who tries to do this pretty much can do it. So I started thinking about how to do this. So in your hands, there should be an index card somewhere in your stuff. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about exercises. But my latest project has been sort of working on this idea of tapping into intuition and really being able to use it. Because in the last couple of years, I've had more personal psychic experiences, which I'm sure many of you guys have boatloads of stories about your own psychic experiences. But I was always one of those that could tap into other people. I didn't tap into a lot myself. So, on that index card, we're going to do a quiet little exercise. Does everybody have a piece of paper or an index card? Okay. And all we're going to do on that index card, or a piece of paper, or whatever you want to write on, I want you to remember, and think about it before you write, remember an experience that affected you in a very positive way in this lifetime as you are this identity. Don't talk about the past life. I want you to talk about something from today in this life. Now, it doesn't have to be from this weekend. It could be any time in this life. But I want you to think about something that really positively affected you or changed your path or profoundly affected you or gave you, maybe changed your direction in life. But I want it to be a positive thought. I don't want you to say, oh, I was raped when I was 12 or, some horror. I don't want a horror show. I want you to think about something that happened that was good to you that may have been a very positive, that ended up having either a long-term or a short-term positive effect on you as a human being. And then write it down. And you may think of more than one thing. That's okay too. Yep. It can end up being positive. I want the sort of the result to be, wow, if that guy hadn't dumped me, I'd have never met Joe, and Joe was fabulous. Okay, so it could be something that started off, icky and turned out great. But I want the positive result because I feel like if I say a profound event, pretty much a lot of people half of the room will find something profoundly negative, and we're not going there. We're going to go to something profoundly positive. We can go to negative some other time. But let's go with positive today. It can be, and just something that really, affected you in an interesting way, in a positive way. While you're doing that, we'll talk about different kinds of psychic things. Psychicness. How many people really are into dreams? Write down your dreams, keep dream journals, love your dreams. Okay. I got a psychic dream about a cat. I have a cat. Her name is Isis. She's mean. She hates everybody except for me. And she's black. And half my clients know her because she's not friendly with them. And she sort of stands out as like a nasty, nasty girl. And she was just born. She was like 6 months old. And my husband is really into dreams. And so he was talking about dreams, and he writes down his dreams, and he keeps dream journals. He's into dreams. And I'm a lot lazier. I don't do all that. I mean, I'll write them down. Something interesting comes up, but, I don't work at it. And Kevin woke up one morning, and he said, I had a dream about Isis. Isis got up and said, Daddy, I'm ready to date now. And we were kind of wondering, remember, I'm from New England, and we only had dogs, and everything got spayed before we got it, okay? So nothing had any sexual anything going on, no puppies, no heat, none of that stuff going on. And sure enough, that day, I watched a cat go into heat. And it was like, Kevin woke up and had that dream, and then I was like, what? I had never seen anything like it. But we remembered that dream because I was like, what does that mean? Does that mean we're having a baby? Does that mean that we're pregnant? What does that mean? And Kevin was a little like, I don't know. And it turned out later on that day, the cat started acting a little crazy, and we had to work through that. So anyway, she was spayed within a short time, and everything's been fine ever since. But the whole time we were wondering, when should we do this? When do you do this with a cat? Do we even need to do it? What do we do? So we didn't have, I hadn't had cats, so I didn't know what the deal was. I do now. But that's a sample of something that was sort of going on. It was casual. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't life-ending. It was just something we were kind of talking about and wondering about. And then one day, somebody who's into dreams happened to have one that answered our question. Daddy, I'm ready to date now. Okay. So sometimes you do get some really good answers from these things. I'm going to, okay, did everybody write down your question? Okay. Or not your question, your discussion, your issue, your thing, your life, your whatever, your story. All right. Just put it away for now. Let's go on with this. In my opinion, intuition has three components, three major components. One is the creativity and the imagination. One is sensitivity and feelings. The other one is empathy. Those are the three major components to intuition from what I've gathered from working with you people for 20 years. That's what I figure this has been about. I find that creativity, the reason my background is in theater, my background is in the arts, and for the most part, I found that actors, I was a director, actors were constantly asking for readings in the 80s. And the more they asked for readings, the more I found I have got to teach them how to do a reading because I cannot keep wasting our rehearsals doing readings on people. And actors are always broke, so they never pay. So it wasn't like, it was all just readings for fun. Got lots of experience. But the creativity and the imagination, I found that once I taught the tech people, the actors, the directors, the musicians, how to do what Pat McKenna taught me how to do, they could do it. And there wasn't anybody who didn't, and they started practicing it. Some of them got very good at it. So I found that the creativity is probably a key factor in intuition. One of the factors, I think, is the language of the soul. And it does come up through symbols, because dreams, dream symbols. It comes up through symbols in imagery. It comes up through words. Some of you guys will be inclined to get words. Kevin Ryerson last night, I heard him say that he is very visual, so he says, I see a lot and sees things more. So sometimes if you're more an artist or a creative visual person, you may get pictures more easily. You may get, if you like to talk or if you are a person that reads a great deal, you may get a lot of information through hearing it or sensing it. Also, there's intuition, which is straight from a higher place. Psychic is of the soul, so it's really soul-to-soul communication. Intuition is from a higher place. It's from the God consciousness. So basically, the God consciousness is straight through the crown chakra and its whole concepts. And that's one of the things that I've been criticized for, is I do tend to talk relatively fast. But what people will, I know, I tried to listen to a tape of myself and I almost went nuts. But what I find is the language, when a whole idea comes through, if you don't capture it, if you don't say it, you will lose it. And then when you lose it, you're going to get a headache. And then when you get a headache, you're going to feel lousy. And you're not going to be able to continue. So I have found that the language of the soul, all these different styles of language, you'll have to figure out what works for you. And you may have done some exercises today that have already started to hone in on this. Whether you're a verbal, auditory person, clairaudience, clairsentience is clear feeling. I've had readings where I've gotten sick to my stomach from certain situations where your stomach goes. And I'm sure you guys have walked into situations where there might be an argument in the family and your stomach turns because you're really picking up on people's intentions, not what they're saying out loud, but maybe what they're thinking. So a lot of times I feel that people are much more psychic than they ever give themselves credit for. If there's anything I can do with this whole psychic realm is to take it out of this area of weirdness that it's been sitting in for 100 or more years. Because this is not weird. It's just part of the human consciousness. I know people don't want to always acknowledge that there's a God, and that's a little frustrating with this kind of thing, because that's where the information's coming from. But in the language of the soul, once you find out what you're inclined to hear, what you're inclined to listen to. I happen to be clairaudient, which is clear hearing and intuitive. That's the combination that works best for me. I will see maybe a couple pictures here and there. I am not predominantly visual. I am predominantly clairaudient and intuitive. I'm probably a genuine intuitive because I get a lot of information straight through here. And the whole idea does have to come through. And a lot of times trying to dissect it. I had a very, very intelligent person, very high IQ, sitting across from me last weekend, and what they were trying to explain to my limited brain took me a while to get my head around, but we finally did it. But that's basically that person's language, their guardians trying to talk to my guardians, trying to interpret through me. So that's how it kind of works. The language of the soul, though, you'll also find that the language of the soul has a style that will work. There might be some areas that you're more inclined to pick up on naturally. So if you work with people, you will probably pick up motive, intentions, feelings, relationships. Linda Schiller-Hanna is another psychic, and we've worked together doing intuitive development classes for years. And we used to joke, we don't joke about this anymore, but we used to joke that we had 5 marriages between the two of us. So we said, well, we're real experts on relationships, not in a good way, in sort of like the way that you mess something up and then you learn from it, and then you mess something else up and you learn from it. So we were saying that, and we both really did get a lot of readings early in our careers with only relationship, exclusively relationship, partially probably for us to learn and partially probably to work with the person. So it usually was probably what she used to call matching pictures. But the language of the soul, whatever you're into, you're going to pick up on. So if you've been spending 20 years studying healing arts and Reiki in the physical body, you might pick up on the physical body because you're interested in it. If you love animals, you're going to pick up on animal communication. If you love arts and crafts and the art world, you're probably going to pick up on art. If you spend time working in real estate or the investment markets and really enjoy that, you probably will pick up on that kind of thing more easily. If you have an openness to it, it will flow more naturally to you. So if there's something that you're particularly good at, if you love symbols and you just digest those symbols, that is something that you are going to naturally pick up on. So that's how this works. All right, that's creativity and imagination. Imagination is the language of the soul. You have to have some way of understanding what's being told to your personality. That's what this really comes down to. Your personality has to get it in order to make this make any sense at all. Sensitivity is the second component, and it has to do with feelings. And I have tried to do readings on just objects before. And I've had people bring in dirt, actually, and rocks, and, archaeologist types, scholarly types bringing stuff in. And it can be done, actually. It was interesting. But I find the stuff that's most easy for me to read has to do with the human condition, the soul experience. That's where I'm the most interested. So I spend most of my time saying, what are we doing here? What is this about? What was the point of this whole thing? And all of my life, I've always had this, what I used to call it, a funny human feeling. And I used to tell my mom, I got that funny human feeling now. And I knew that I was sort of dissociated from myself. And I knew that everything was fake. I knew that the floor was fake. I knew that my feet were fake. I knew everything was fake. And it was a strange feeling. I've had it all my life, and it still comes to me every now and then now. And I knew that from a long time ago, from the beginning of time, that there was some other puzzle as to why we were here, but I couldn't quite figure it out. And all my life, I was kind of like, what is this? And what I found was the more I tapped into the feelings and to emotions and to the essence of the soul, which is much more interesting, it started filling in. And the Casey work is another good example of information that will fill in a lot of information about why things are the way they are, what you're here to do. We start getting into karma, start getting into spiritual experiences, life lessons, life purposes, life mission. We start getting into really interesting stuff. So that stuff really is the stuff I like to work with. But the average human pretty much could tap into another human being's feelings if they have not completely blocked their own. If you have completely blocked your own, feelings are not going to be your thing. So, but if you have been able to work with your feelings in this life, or you're aware that you have feelings, you probably will feel somebody else's feelings, and that's the key is the sensitivity and feelings. There is a machine, and I don't see it here. I don't know if it's even here anymore. There was a machine that was back here in the other room, and I don't know if they probably moved it, and it had like a square. How many people have been here before, haven't you? Yeah, you guys know the thing I'm talking about. It has a square, a star, a circle. Remember this? It's upstairs? Well, there's ways of beating that machine, I found out. But, because people could see the light on the wall. One person is supposed to be the sender. The signal will turn on. One person is supposed to be the sender. The partner is supposed to be the receiver and go, oh, I see your square. And they pick it up and they do it. And they say, oh, and then you put down, you press the button of which one you've gotten. And I had a professor, worked here, named Doug Richards. And I'd do this machine. And he would be like, come on, Mary, you're a psychic, you can do this. And I stunk. I get like 3 out of 25, maybe 2 out of 25. I wouldn't even get probability. I wouldn't even get what you normally would get if it was just probability. And then one day, my mom was here. I had broken a foot, and my mom was helping me. My husband wasn't my boyfriend. He was in Egypt at the time. And so my mom came in, and I said, hey, Mom, want to go to my Atlantic University class? And my mom did go, and my mom, we had these stupid symbol cards. Dr. Richards was really a scientist, and he was going to study how we did this. And he was into studying this. This is the early 90s. And once again, my numbers really stunk. And there were like 50 cards, and I still was getting like 2 and 3. I really, really, really stunk. And I knew I stunk. And my mom came up, and my mom was doing the cards, and I was like, hey, my mom could do it. And I was like, hey, what's up, Ma? And she was like, okay, yeah, I just feel like this is this, and this is the, and she could kind of do it. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so, then people said, well, that makes sense. You're psychic, and psychic is supposed to be inherited. It must have some genetics, so obviously you inherited from your mother. And I said, well, yeah, that's nice, Doug, but I'm adopted. And she's adopted from me. We're not genetic in any way. And I puzzled over this for a couple years, trying to figure out why my mom could do those cards, because she got like 18 out of 50. She got a lot. She got a really high number. And I realized that when she was in school, had taken a lot of shorthand, and these symbols are very similar to shorthand. So in her world, that was a language. That did make sense. And if you're a mathematician, for example, or into crop circles, or into symbols of different kinds, then you probably can do these symbols really well, because these are just symbols. That's all they are. But to me, they were just squiggly little annoying things on a black and white card that just irritated me. And the more irritated you get, I'll tell you, the less you can tune in. But that's one of those things that I found, because she had taken, she was a secretary to, they used to call them secretaries, but she was, I guess now they call them assistants, but she was a secretary to this guy, and she took a lot of shorthand, and I found one of her old pads, and it had all these squiggly things. I had no idea what it was, but she could read it as, oh, that means this, and this is a letter, and this is to so-and-so, and this is what this was. And she would still use that, because I guess she learned it long enough to go where you could take notes really well on it. So that was an interesting thing. I found that if you are into numbers, symbols, or crop circles, or other languages, whether it's, Egyptian or hieroglyphics or different kinds of things, you probably will pick up on this kind of thing pretty easily. All right, enough of that. Generally speaking, because you're a human, and the seat, I believe the seat of the soul is about here in the heart area, the pineal and the heart. I think this combination. I know that there's a lot of work about the lower body, the belly button here area being where the soul's intuition comes from. Not for me. It really works up here. It's the top 4 chakras is where it is for me. It's never been down here. Casey will say it's down here, and probably for him, maybe it probably was. Mine, it's always been up through here, from the heart chakra up, and that's where I find this. That those of us who are more sensitivity-oriented psychics probably work, and feeling-oriented psychics work more with the heart chakra type of issue. How many of you people would consider yourself sensitive, or at one time? Maybe you got tougher, but you start off kind of sensitive. You guys are going to have a piece of cake with this thing. Okay, all right. The last factor for intuition is empathy. And this is the thing that I find sort of makes or breaks psychics. You have to be able to have empathy for the person, no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how horrible your life is or how great your life is. You've got to have empathy for that person for that time that they're there in front of you. In your cases, tomorrow you're going to do a reading for a person. Tomorrow, not today. You will do a reading for another person, and you will have to have empathy for that person for maybe 5 minutes. You can do it. But that's what it requires. That you need to have empathy for that person for 5 minutes. It's not about you. It's not about your aching back. It's not about the fact that you forgot to eat breakfast. It's about them, and that's why empathy works. In the exercises that empathy is about others, and the reason I could do this is I didn't have a heck of a lot of identity when I was younger. I was kind of a blob, so I basically kind of like, okay, I can do, I could be anything. If I was with one guy, I could be anything from a biker chick to a mountain climber, to an athlete. I could be anything they wanted me to be, so I was pretty chameleon. So the whole empathy thing, I could sort of tap into whatever was and just become it. So that, I obviously needed some personal work there, but I got it. As far as the empathy is concerned, when you're doing the exercise tonight for yourself, I want you to have empathy for yourself and realize that you deserve the information from God, from Spirit, for yourself. That you deserve the information. And I want to talk about needing information. Information is important, but I want you to understand that if you get information for a situation that we're working on, if you're getting information, a lot of times if people come in for a reading and they say, well, is it better to come in the morning or in the afternoon? Or is it better to come in on a Tuesday or a Thursday? Or is it better if the sun is in Scorpio and blah, 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 blah. And it really isn't about any of that. It really has to do with the person and their desire to be in front of me. If they actually want the information, if they really need the information, then it'll be there. And I'll give you an example, and I'll use myself as an example. I had a situation a year ago this November where my mom had a stroke. And I was calling her house on November 15th last year. And she didn't answer the phone. And she had had a major stroke, and we didn't know this. And the phone wasn't being picked up. And she had had a heart valve replacement in July, so she had done quite well from that. Unfortunately, this is what happens sometimes when you have heart valve replacements. And in her case, and I want to read this to you because I want you to be clear how much I needed this information. I found that one of the reasons I probably didn't get a lot of psychic information in my life was because probably I was so interested in everything else in the world, I wasn't really needing it. I wasn't really needing all of it right then. Maybe I wasn't ready for it. Maybe I didn't need it. I was really interested in everybody else. That's how I learned to read everybody else. I got really interested in everybody else. I didn't spend a lot of time. I was still working on myself, but I wasn't needing stuff for myself. Last November, I started becoming aware of getting information for myself, and I'll tell you how that happened. When she had the stroke, I went up the next day, canceled all you, sorry, anybody who was in here I canceled, I apologize for that, but I did cancel you people, and went up there. And it was not a situation that was salvageable. It was a serious stroke. And this thing my sister and I started talking about was decisions needed to be made for end-of-life issues. And we started talking about it, and I said, well, you know, I don't want her to suffer. And that's the only thing we said, we don't want her to suffer. And you can't really tell. And all of you guys are grown-ups in here, you've all had relatives who've died, or good close friends who've died. I know you've all been through stuff. So you understand where I'm coming from when you say you don't want a person to suffer. And so that's what I started saying is, okay, she can't, whatever it is, as long as she doesn't suffer. And every morning, because it was so stressful and so terrible for us, because we had one of the good moms, not one of the high-maintenance moms that's out partying in the middle of the night. We had one of the good ones. And so we were every morning we were waking up and depressed and going over to the hospital and to this, all this stuff. You guys have been through all that kind of thing, I'm sure yourselves. And every morning I'd wake up about 4 o'clock. And I'd start, well, I'm awake. Here we go, another lovely day. And I'd start working on, the day. And I'd say, okay, well, let's meditate. And so my big intention at this time was, okay, no suffering. Whatever this is, let's not have any suffering. This is not what we want for her. And I had a very strong, what I would say, genuine psychic experience that was for me, to comfort me, to tell me what was going on. And I will say the reason I had it was because I really needed it. So I would say if you guys really need something, if you're in a situation where your kind of back is against the wall and something's really bothering you and you're upset about something, you will get it. This is what happened. In my head, now remember, I tune into everybody else. I hear the same voice. It's not a different voices, okay? It's still my inner voice. I hear the same voice for you as you as you as you. So it's the same voice. This was not the voice. This is the voice I heard. It was a very strong, masculine voice. And of course, and like everybody else who's doing psychic work, I was like, oh, here we go. Could be a flaky thing. It could be wishful thinking. And I had to write this down because it was very succinct. It spoke very clearly and very slowly. And you can tell by the way my brain works, slow isn't my thing. You have my word. I assure you that your mother does not suffer in any way. You have my word on this. I am Luke. And of course, in my head, being somewhat twisted and exhausted, I thought, Skywalker? But we all know that was actually a Darth Vader voice, so I didn't know. And I said in my thoughts, because I had received it, and I knew I had received something straight through. And then I said, who's Luke? And he said, look it up. Well, I was a little offended, actually. I was like, thanks, guy. I can't imagine what this guy looked like. Thank God I'm not clairvoyant because I didn't want to see this one. But it was very, very clear. And so then I said to my husband, I called him or wherever he was, I said, I know there's a Luke book thing in the Bible, but would that be anything, he said, what happened? I told him. And he said, well, according to the Casey readings, Luke was a physician at the time of Casey's Jesus' time, and that he was, I guess, maybe helped Jesus get some of his clients, raising him from the dead and all that. I guess that he's the one that sort of brought some of them in. So Luke was a physician, and he was knowledgeable, and this guy definitely had the attitude of a doctor, I thought. So I kind of said, well, there's a genuine psychic experience. And it had to do with my need to get it. I really needed, so I went and immediately told my family, who I think thought, oh my God, is she drinking? What's wrong with her? But I did tell them anyway, and they kind of went, well, whatever. And, they could take it or leave it, but I did tell everybody. So that's what happened, and so that's where I feel like psychic work will come in when you're in an emergency. I also think it can come in when you're just living life. And the more we get into the 21st century, the Aquarian age, I feel like you're going to need it. And the reason is, back in the old days, doing readings, it was easy. And I think even Ryerson commented on this yesterday. One of his guides, or one of the guys that talks through him, said something about it was so much easier when there was more karma. He said something about that. And it was, because it was so much easier to predict that somebody who screwed up was going to continue to screw up, because that's kind of what they got good at. Or if they were really, really artistic or really greedy or really whatever, the writing was on the wall. Free will, how many people use their free will? It just isn't something people do. They're just not that innovative. And so it was easy to, kind of get an idea about, if you're doing readings before 87, you are really looking at, this person has this, an eye for an eye, you got in trouble with this, you messed up around with her husband, now he's messing with your wife, blah, 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 blah. And it was, it was pretty clean. It was pretty simple. Now we've got this free will thing going on. And people are starting to use it. And people are sending me cards. And I get Christmas cards from some of the clients going, having a fabulous life, got past all that nonsense a few years ago, loving my life now, hope you have a good time, come buy one of my quilts for $10,000. And they're doing really, really well. They're doing super well, succeeding as artists, succeeding as writers, succeeding as singers, things they really wanted to be when they grew up. They may have wanted to be it when they were 20. They ended up being it when they were 50. But it worked out. So I'm finding more and more people are what I call graduating. And reading them is not that easy, because it's their free will. Now, that's why it's much more important to go into the soul level and bring information in from the soul level, because the soul level is so much more fluid as far as what you have to work with people. So the soul level gives you so much more information about what your soul history is, what your talents may have been, what you have started to develop, what you've left unfinished from other lifetimes, and what you've been doing with yourself on this planet. And by the way, Casey says, once you're here, you're here. Until you fix it, you're not getting off. So I have more people, back in the old days, people would be like, when am I getting out of here? And I'm thinking, don't say that. Don't ever say that, because, I don't know when. I don't expect to get out anytime soon. So it could be a while. So what we're working with intuition and with empathy and with all this stuff with the Aquarian age is you have more free will, and you're going to have to tap into your higher consciousness to know what your life purpose and life mission are. If you know what your life purpose and soul mission are, you are going to be able to fulfill, using your free will, using your guidance, using your inner voice, your upper voice, your higher voice, your soul voice, whatever you want to call it. You're going to have to tap into that higher voice to be able to work it. And this is when I used to work with Tom. Tom is sitting over here. Tom with Kathy Baker over here. Tom had been my therapist for a while. You can see I needed one. And he had worked with me for a while, and we ended up doing some readings, and some of the readings actually talked about different levels of consciousness. And what we're really working on now is we're getting into the upper levels of consciousness as a human race. And so all the stuff you keep hearing about the negativity of the human race and the world is going to end and what's going to happen at 2012, nothing, okay? Nothing unless you make something happen. So what it comes down to, and this is what happened in 1999. We had a party. Okay, Kevin, my husband, likes to cook. He's home cooking, making cookies right now. And so cooking is his thing. So he made enough food. I figured he made such a big party in 1999 that we could have fed the whole neighborhood for about a week or more. That's how much food he makes. They actually are Italian, but they make a lot of food in that family. And so that's what they do. So we had enough food for it. We had a party for 1999. Remember, everyone was all afraid. Oh, this is going to happen. Oh, that's going to happen. Nothing happened. The only thing that happened in our house is our neighbor thought it'd be funny to turn off the lights at midnight. So he went into our garage and hit the breaker, and that was the only thing that happened. I had to reset the clocks. So that was the only thing that happened. So 2012 is the end of the Mayan calendar, which is the end of the eras as they were purported for certain kinds of development. That's all this is. Now you get to create the world with God. And you have to work from an inner voice to do it. And you can go to church. You don't have to go to church. It's not a requirement. But the idea is the more you work with the soul, the more you work with the soul's voice, the more you work with the God consciousness. That's why I say it's really a little bit easier if you work with a God concept somewhere in your life, that there is a higher power, that there's something else out there, because it makes it easier to work with something higher and greater than you. The other thing is I find that humans, and we'll talk about this a lot tomorrow, humans have a tendency to not be able to solve problems just with their pure intellect. And I have found more often than not that I can tune into a problem and come up with something that turns out in hindsight was really good. But when I just try to think about the problem, I can't for the life of me get anything. Or I can't get anything that really solves it in a way that's really constructive. So that's one of the things I'm finding is that when you work with that spiritual voice, that higher voice, when you work in cooperation with God, we become co-creators with God. And as we become co-creators, there's no reason that you can't have the things you would like in your life, as long as you don't become obsessed with it. So that's why all this prosperity talk has gone on. There's been a lot of talk with prosperity. I think there's different teachers out there teaching different kinds of prosperity consciousness and different kinds of attraction, laws of attraction. Of course, there's other universal laws besides the laws of attraction. I just want to remind you, there is karmic law. There is the law of cause and effect, So, you are going to bring that with you too. But there's no reason to have to live at a survival level anymore in minutia. There's no reason to have everything be difficult anymore. There's no reason, I think Kevin last night called it addiction to miracles, that we constantly had to create a crisis to have a solve, to have a God consciousness, that the more we were in the God consciousness consistently, whether it's through meditation, which is listening to God, whether it's through prayer, which is talking to God or working with God, connecting with God, being aware of God, that kind of consciousness really makes it a lot easier to solve problems. And I have found that a lot of the things do come through. Psychicness, my whole goal before I leave this planet is to take it out of the weird realm and take it out of the realm. Other people are working on the scientific side. I think it really is a spiritual experience. And I do feel that human beings are meant to become more spiritually connected and attuned. And the more connected and attuned they become, the better the world will become. The more we'll be able to solve our problems, the more we'll cure things like cancer, the more we'll be able to fix things. We're bright, but we're not so bright we can do it alone. So the idea of bringing that higher consciousness into the reality seems to fix it, seems to bring it to a point of fullness. It's almost like a bud to an open rose. It really makes it much more fulfilled.